Welcome back, my friends, to the Moto Guzzi show that never ends. This is part 3 in the saga of wiring for dummies performed by a dummy. So we're getting to the end. We're 99% there. And I just wanted to show you the way things are before I finally button it up and tidy up all the loose ends. Now, my philosophy has been to wire the bike up my way, in a way that I understand, and to do away with some of the things that I don't agree with, the way that bikes were wired in those days. And basically, I want to keep my wire runs short. I want to keep everything as close to the battery as possible. I want to keep it out the weather, and I don't want to put it in a place where the wires can twist and move and put strain on connectors, and where the wires themselves can break internally and cause problems. So I want to keep everything back here if I can. Now, the Guzzi normally has a fuse arrangement like this, and it's normally crammed into the headlight. Now, this was in its own little box behind a fairing on my bike. I did away with the fairing, don't like it, don't like having that much hardware in front of me. I like to see the road and where my wheels are going. And this has got a lot of undesirable things, like, you know, the fuses are all exposed to the atmosphere. They're bendy, they're breaky, they're horrible. It's got bullet connectors, it's got crimped terminals, connectors, which I think don't have any place on a motorbike, which might vibrate and break. And all in all, it's just horrible. Like I say, if this is a concourse or a show bike, I'd probably do something with it, renew it, and make it look nice and shiny. But I don't have to do that, because all I have to do is please myself on this bike. So that's what I'm going to do with that. So, like I said, I wanted the bike to look tidy, but it's not going to be a show bike. It's a bike that's going to get used, hopefully, for some really nice long trips. So, to do that, let me sit down here. Right, so, keeping things simple, we got a humongous battery, probably bigger than it needs to be, but I'm going to keep it because this is a lawn tractor battery. I can get them anywhere around here, so don't have to be special. They're cheap. The starter motor is bigger than it needs to be, much bigger than it would be on a Japanese bike of this era. I think it's the same starter motor they put on a Fiat car. I've been through that, reconditioned it as best I can, so I'm pretty happy that that's going to work. Battery, I know, is going to last a long time, so overcapacity is good because it means reliability. Now, the fuse boxes, I've taken the cover off, but these I thought were waterproof. They're not. They're water resistant. These are for boats. All the fittings inside are stainless steel, so they're corrosion resistant. I've got 2 fuse boxes, one this side of the bike and one on the right hand side. And all the circuits from this fuse box here run along this conduit up to the front of the bike, and the ones on the other side do the same. So I'm keeping all my big power wires down here. So this is the main power from my battery with a big humongous fuse in there. This goes to my isolator switch here, which I've shown you before. That activates all these circuits now. These 2 wires come from the main switch. That's rated at 75 amps, so I'm not worried about that. My voltage controller is back here. My starter relay is there, and just over there is the flasher unit. So everything's tucked away in here. To get at all this, all you got to do is take the battery out. No big deal. Now on this side, I've got my various circuits. So going from memory, that's ignition, that's the starter. That one is my power to my idiot lights and auxiliary. That one is for some 12-volt outlets that I've put down here. So I've got a 12-volt outlet here, which is one of those DIN type ones that BMW and Triumph use. There just happened to be a hole in the frame right there, which I made bigger, and then I happen to have this DIN socket, so I put that on. So that's going to be useful for powering a tire pump, air compressor. You could, if you've got a saddlebag with electrical gear in, you can charge your electrical gear from there. Now there's two circuits connected to it, and the other one comes out here, comes out the main harness here, and this will be for a heated jacket liner or something like that, or you could charge the bike from this. Indeed, you could charge the battery from that even, you know. So those are handy to have. Let's look at the other side quickly. Now, the fuse box on this side will ordinarily be protected by that. Now, the fuses we've got here are mainly to do with lights. So we've got, going from memory, we've got our main lights, auxiliary lights. We've got an additional auxiliary feed, and I believe it's I believe it's turn signals, stop lights and horn, etc., etc. And they all come into the main wiring harness and go up to the headstock area. Now, let's talk about switchgear. Now, on this side, we have a switchgear which controls the dip beam, turn signals, and the horn. And this is a pattern unit for a late model Yamaha XS650. It's very similar to the ones that Cycle Garden use on their excellent restorations, although theirs is better because it has a light switch here to turn the lights on. Mine doesn't. It happens to be here, and I put it there because it filled a hole in this headlamp bucket for no other reason. Now this had a lot of redundant wires, which are these ones here, which I've taped off. They perform functions that I don't need on this bike, but all the wires that came out of this were a different color, and I'll go through how I joined them up. I've left all this out so that you can see it. This will be wrapped and tidied up and tied back to the frame somewhere there. Now, what's next? Now, when it comes to grounds, I don't rely on any of the accessories like the rear lights grounding themselves through the bolts to ground, and I run separate grounds. I have mentioned it in a previous video. So if we look at the rear lights, oh, and another thing about the wiring here. Ordinarily, the wires for the rear of the bike would go underneath the mudguard on the other side, but here I've got them in a hose. You can see that rubber hose. Excuse these, I haven't tried to cut these off yet. I run it under the frame rail and it comes out here, and then it goes down to feed the turn signals and the rear light. And then coming from each of those is the ground wire, which is ground to the frame right here. So I'm not relying on the chrome on the switch on the outside of the light units to provide the ground. They've got their own separate ground. So if there's any problems, I doubt if it'll be a ground on these. Other grounds. Everything is, I try to get it as close to the battery as I can, which means to the engine or gearbox. So the grounds here are for the voltage controller and for the auxiliary wire that goes up to feed lights. They're grounded on this side to a gearbox bolt, all that has been filed down, so it makes a good contact. On the other side, under here, we have more grounds, and these are for our 12 volt outlets, so they're grounded to there. An additional ground up front is here. Now everything up the front of the bike, the lights, turn signals, horn, everything up the front is grounded back to this bolt here, and this is where the front brake light switch was. It was a hydraulic switch. It would have been in this this brake line here, which is the new. I replaced it with a new one, a one piece, which goes straight down to the caliper. So everything is ground to here. This has been especially cleaned off. So everything grounded back to here on the front, so I don't have to worry about trying to ground through paint or anything like that. Up the other side, we've got a starter switch, so that's wired in, and it goes back to the starter relay, and thence to the starter solenoid. Right, just to prove that everything works, I've got my main battery isolator, which I mentioned in a previous video. This is it. So the battery is now connected to the bike. Turn this on. Now all my circuits are now activated. There is an additional switch which provides power to the coil, which you can call it an ignition switch if you like. I'm not going to show you where that is because that's secret. Now, so as we turn this on and off, well, our little lights come on, which proves something. Yeah, so let's go through the functions. Okay, so we've got our generator light, and what that one is it comes back to here on the top of the dynamo. It's this one. It's identified by two little blue collars or tapes. That's that one. We've got our neutral light, which is the green wire that comes back down here and goes onto the side of the gearbox. There. We got our oil light, which is connected to this wire, which goes down to the oil switch, which is the red one, which is identified by these tapes. The other one is main beam, which will come on when we turn the lights on. So lights are on. You can see. We'll put it on main beam. And you see our little blue light comes on. Main beam comes on. Tail light even works. How about that? We turn him off and on. Brake light is now operated electrically by a switch on the front brake lever. So that all works. The only one that's left, I think, is the horn. That works. Oh, and the starter. Let's just prove that the starter works. Bike won't start because there's no gas tank and no gas in the carbs. We've also got a place for an ignition key, which is redundant. But I will put a key in it and make a big show of using it every time I start the bike, so that if anybody thinks anybody wants to steal my bike, that might confuse them for a little while. Turn everything off again. Isolate the battery. So that, in a nutshell, is it. I'll go through some of the wiring details, and I'm doing this video Mainly for the reason that if you want to wire up a bike yourself, you don't have to go and buy a wiring harness. Everybody seems to think, oh, I have to buy a wiring harness, this, that, and the other. But if your bike is non-standard and you've changed a few things on it, that wiring harness is not going to work. Like if you go and you get a harness for a 1965 BSA A65 and you are running an electronic voltage regulator rectifier, then you're going to have to change the wiring harness, aren't you? And then you're going to want to put the regulator rectifier where it can get air blast, and you may not want it where the BSA originally was. So then you've got to add extra wires in. And I did this to a BSA, and by the time I changed so many things, I figured I might as well have just made a wiring harness myself. So every bike since then, if I didn't like the standard wiring harness, I just made one. And it's a process of elimination. Nobody taught me how to do it. I had to work it out myself. Like, what bits do I need? What are the minimum bits? Like, for instance, on my bike, there's only one brake light switch, and that's up there. On these Guzzies, there's another one down here, operated by that arm. And that works on the back brake. Now, that works in... that is situated in all the filth and muck that comes off the back wheel, so you know what's going to happen. Eventually, it's going to crap out. And I'm mostly a front brake user myself, and I've got used to old bikes that only ever had one brake light switch. So if I'm going to be using the back brake, say I'm on a very slippery, muddy road or gravel road or something like that, I'll use the back brake, but I'll also just give it enough front brake just to put the light on. And you get used to doing stuff like that. It's no big deal. In some countries it won't be legal, but you know, it's just the way it is. Like, it's not perfect. Right, so you're faced with the daunting prospect of wiring a bike. It's like asking a question, you know, how do you eat a whole elephant? And the answer to that is one piece at a time. So how do you wire a whole bike? Well, you eat one piece of pizza at a time. You know I like pizza, and you know I can't read very well, so I write everything big on pizza boxes, and here they are. So basically the way I go about it is I try to keep everything simple now. All my lights are in the main blue, from blue wires. So, you know, at the front, headlight is blue, turn signals will be, to the left will be brown, to the right is green with identified with red tape. Auxiliary lights for fog or drive, whichever I fit, are blue, identified with green tape. Rear, the tail light is blue, stop light is blue, identified with red, and my turn signals are brown and green, same as the front. Now, this thing had all different coloured wires coming out of it. So I spent an hour or two, stripped it all down and found out what the wires did. There's some redundant wires in it that were used on late model XS650s, which aren't relevant to what I'm using it for. All I want is to be able to control my lights, control my turn signals and my horn. And these are the wires that do the job. Like the blue and the yellow is power in, the yellow is power out, green is power out, and I've designated them for that. Turn signals, the power in is brown and white, and the power out are these colors. Okay, and then the horn, the power in is pink, and the black is grounded out. Right, so they get attached to the main harness. Now let's look at the main harness. And we'll start off with the right hand side fuse box, which is more relevant because it's got more of those light switches on. Now fuse number 1 The wire that comes out of it is blue. It goes to the light switch, which is on the headlamp. And when that's turned on, it powers the tail light direct with a blue wire. Now, that is a connector. Now, when the power comes off that light switch, it goes up into the dip switch area here. And it goes in on a blue and a yellow, and then it comes out on a yellow for main beam and a green for dip beam. Now if we go to fuse number 2, we've got a blue wire coming out, identified with green tape, and this is for our horn. It goes from our horn, it joins the pink wire on the switch, and then it gets grounded out by a black wire, and that gets grounded out onto that common ground on the steering head that I showed you. But also we've got a blue wire, which is auxiliary power, because we're not going to be using the horn all the time, so we might as well use that power to do something else as well, which is my auxiliary lights. And if the horn causes problems and the auxiliary lights don't work, that's no big deal, because we've still got the headlight, right? And that's my thinking. Number 3 on that fuse box is a green wire, and that goes to the flasher unit, which is tucked down behind the fuse box itself, down in the bottom here. The green wire then joins the main harness, comes up to the front to where I've connected it to the switch, the flasher, the flasher switch. This thing here, that thing, which is brown and white in this case, and then the wire that comes out is brown for the left and green identified with red tape for the right, and then that will be repeated front and back. I haven't put that in. Now the bottom one is yellow. Now yellow comes along, comes up to here until it joins that mini harness for the switch. Actually, it's the other side. It's the other side. And then that one goes to the switch on the brake lever, and then when it joins the connector where it joins the main harness again, comes out as blue with a red tape, and that goes to the back of the bike, the stop light. Now hidden away in the harness is I've got a spare wire, which is a red one, which is not connected to anything. It goes from the headstock on the bike down to the battery, and that is red and it's taped off. So if I want to power anything up front in years to come, I've got this red wire which I can utilize, but at the moment it does nothing. Now my little wiring harness for the no, I'll do that later. Let's do the left hand side fuse box. Now the left hand side fuse box, like fuse number 1, is a red wire. Now this red wire goes straight up to the handlebars there to the starter switch, and it comes out of the starter switch as brown, and it goes down to the starter relay here, and it comes in on this connector here, which I think is 86, and then when you operate it, the power goes down to ground, and then what that does, it operates a little coil in here which operates a little solenoid which turns this on, which is your main power from the battery, which comes in on a red cable. When the connection is made within the relay, the power comes out on a red wire and goes to the starter solenoid, which is this one here, and that goes down there to the starter solenoid. Solenoid then activates the starter. So that's all pretty simple. The next fuse down is our black, identified with red tape, and these are our outlets, which are, like I showed you, this one and this one. Now, the next one down is a yellow, and that's an auxiliary power. Well, actually, it's a dashboard light power as well. The reason being that it's not consuming much power with the dashboard lights, so we can pull off auxiliary power for something up there which we might need, like a USB charger, a 12-volt outlet, heated grips, whatever. That could be up there. Now, our dash wiring is this. This is our yellow wire, power from our fuse box here. Comes in and it does the neutral light, which is green in my case, and the wire is green. That's this one here, and that goes down to the switch on the side of the gearbox. So when the bike's in neutral, the connection is made, the power runs to earth and the green light comes on. Similar with the oil, which is a red light, red for danger, and that goes from the idiot light down through the wire here to the oil pressure switch. And the other one is the orange, which is that one, which is very slightly orange. And then that comes back down to the dynamo generator there, which is that one. The other one is power from the lights, comes in on a blue wire. Most of my lighting is blue, remember? Comes in on the blue, and when it's on main beam, it lights that blue one up. So that's that. The final one on that fuse box is the white one, which is providing the ignition. It's a power to the coil, so this is our ignition switch, which is a secret hidden switch, which I haven't showed you. And that provides power to your coil, and then the black wire that comes off the coil goes to your points, or your contact breaker points, and provides your spark. Obviously your HT leads come out the top of your coil here, and hooked up to that there's a rev counter, electronic rev counter. That I think is that. And then for the finale, the magic finale, we have the wiring diagram, the whole wiring diagram. Look at that. What an amazing accomplishment, eh? Especially for an idiot like me. This is my third attempt, and it's as good as it's going to get for a while. I think in the winter I'll sit down with a nice big sheet of white paper and some colored crayons, and I'll do it a lot better. But in the meantime, this is it. This is a pictorial representation of all of that. They're both equally untidy. But if you want to see what it's done, you just take a screenshot of that. And in actual fact, it's fairly simple. I mean, you look at the wiring diagram on a modern bike, you know, oh my God, where do you start? But everything on this is fairly simple. There's only one relay. I know relays are supposed to be the wonderful answer to everything, but to me, no, they're not. I like big heavy-duty switches, like 70 amp switches here, 60 amp switch there, 30 amp switch on the headlight. Give me that every time, because I know it's going to work forever. Now, a relay could crap out at any time, especially if it's an Indian one, which they fill with grease, like they do on the Enfields. Sorry, Enfield. So anyway, so all of that information eventually is going to be reduced and find its way into my workshop manual for this bike, which is invaluable. When I had the bike, I was given this, which is an original for the original V7 700 and the 750 Ambassador. Now, in a lot of cases, the information in here is not relevant to my bike, but in some cases it is. There's some really good wiring diagrams in here if you want to go simple. They're a little simpler than this, which is an Eldorado one. If you want to go complicated, then you can go an Eldorado Police, but I don't recommend it. Now, all of this information in here, there's tuning notes. There's a lot of tuning notes. There's a gearbox rebuild, which is very useful, but not entirely relevant to my bike, but a lot of good information in here. And then we've got other information. Actually, this is in here too. a lot of good stuff in here, and all of the workshop manuals. There's 2 different kinds. There's I believe it's a Chilton's. I think this is a Chilton's. And then there's a Moto Guzzi one. And these all came from Greg Bender's This Old Tractor page, which is a fantastic resource if you've got anything to do with Guzzis. Go there, and you can download all this stuff for free. It's fantastic. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a fantastic help. It won't necessarily give you any ideas on how to do this. I mean, all this came from my head, but actually, if you don't want to do this, I think you can buy wiring harnesses from him, and from what I've heard, they're absolutely excellent. But I like to be a little different and do it my way, do it the simple way. So there we are, that's it. A very long video. If you've made it to the end, you must be some kind of superstar, or you must have fallen asleep and woke up again. So this is the bike bare. The next time you see it, hopefully it will be resplendent in its with its tank and seat and side covers, and hopefully she'll be ready for the road. So until then, it's goodbye from me, and take care of yourselves, look after one another. Rubber side down, Guzzi side up, keep it shiny. Enjoy your summer riding. Goodbye.